Well, I'm going to talk about higher education business in a broad sense, just as a way of describing the wider landscape within which business schools, I think, can have a central role. And I'd like to draw attention to three kind of dimensions or perspectives I think that can often be missed. And the first is about the real necessity for integrating local and national ambitions. Now, higher education is, of course, a sector with a fantastic record of economic success. We're absolutely right to celebrate our international standing. As Angus noted, we punch well above our weight. But I think there are a couple of challenges here. I think firstly, I don't think we recognise, we don't celebrate or promote the sector as a diverse ecosystem of institutions, either nationally or internationally as much as we should. And I think secondly, we place far too little emphasis on the potential for and indeed the importance of thinking locally in terms of the economic power of higher education. So I think we need to be asking some really big questions about the role of universities as economic hubs. So how can universities and business schools in particular contribute to this agenda through the engagement and support of small and medium-sized businesses, the development of enterprise-friendly parks and clusters, the smart use of their facilities, and of incubation and grow-on spaces. Because I think really it's the local level where strategies for return to growth can be most clearly conceived. So I welcome the government's announcement of a funding package for LEPs, which should have universities at heart. I think most of them do now. When we were developing the Wilson Review, there was certainly a high level of scepticism about the emphasis we laid on LEPs. But as we said in the review itself, they really are the only game in town in terms of local economic development. And we do need some kind of vehicle for local coordination, not least to consolidate the SME voice in specific sectors and broker the kind of many-to-many conversations between universities and businesses, creating the linkages we need for economic growth. What is the role of universities in helping to achieve the goals and targets for bringing SMEs in their localities new to export markets? How can they productively link into the new UKTI regional offices that will be advising those companies? Universities have a wealth of experience of doing business overseas, in addition to, of course, the specialist expertise that they offer. And I think we mustn't forget that most of our institutions were founded and they're inspired by a strong sense of civic ambition, of pride and distinctiveness. They were not accidents of place. So, how do our claims for kind of global standing and sort of global ambitions really relate to those claims that we make for our communities and for businesses in our localities? And it seems rather kind of divisive and unproductive to impose a single hierarchy from the world-class institution down to the local university. What does that actually communicate to our communities and to the businesses that are around us? So I suppose what I'm suggesting is that local and international goals can be compatible with, rather than in tension with, significant and multifaceted engagement at local level. We can aim to be world-class at local impact too. Secondly, I'd like to make a plea for integrating the academic and the corporate levels when it comes to the university business agenda. Now, of course, corporate strategy is vitally important, and leadership sets institutional culture, as we discussed in the review. If we want to be world-class at university business engagement, we need open and collaborative cultures in our universities, in our businesses and in government. And I say cultures plural because universities do need to see local, national and international activities, priorities, ambitions through the lens of their institutional mission. And I hope that the Wilson Review laid that emphasis on the differentiation of institutions out clearly. But I think we also need to reflect on what this means at discipline level. It should mean something different to study business at Hertforshire or at Loughborough or at Bristol or wherever it might be, and that's right. And a key question is how we communicate that difference, that discipline level and institutional level difference to students and other interested parties. And I think this is another case where those kind of rigid hierarchies are rather actually unproductive for everyone. But within the framework of institutional mission, how can we mobilise the different approaches to knowledge that are expressed within our disciplines in an integrated way to address the social and economic issues that our communities and our businesses face? And just to give you one example that brings together business schools with my discipline of history, how about those two groups of academics working together to help SMEs profit from their past? Keeping and using good records, capturing institutional memory, understanding company history These can all help businesses map out better strategies for ongoing development, help with brand development and staff engagement, all those kind of important things. And I think that's just one example of how we can mobilise at discipline level for the good of our local economies. And indeed that's something Hertforshire's got an event on business and heritage coming up at the end of October, which Lord Manelli is presenting at. She's fantastic advocate of business archives. But I think, thirdly and finally, both of those preceding points call for a rethinking of divides that is often made between economic and social arguments for higher education. Now, the language of relevance and value is an economic one, and let's face it, we all learn to speak it. But I think it would be productive if we can shift the terms in which we talk about higher education to talk about people and place instead. And when you start thinking in those terms, the division between economic and social arguments no longer really makes much sense. And I think we can be quite hard-nosed about this, though I don't think we need to be. If you think about sort of a major inward investment decision, for example, that has a quintessentially human dimension to it. Now, the company needs to be able to recruit employees with the right mix of skills and experience, there's no doubt about that. But it also needs that place to have a certain quality of life if they're going to retain those employees. And indeed, any sustainable community needs to involve social, economic and cultural factors that interlink and sort of interact in interesting ways. So if I was to sum up, I think what we need to do is be a bit more sensitised to these connectivities, so between local and national, between corporate and discipline level, and between economic and social arguments. And I think if we did actively look for them, and were able to find a shared vocabulary for expressing their worth, we might be able to break down some of the dichotomies I think are actually in the way of higher education. I think they're in the way, not only in terms of universities realising their potential as drivers of economic success, as economic hubs, but also in terms of inspiring the genuinely public debate about higher education that has been so conspicuously absent in recent years. Thank you.
Oh, that's great. It's really challenging points there. Okay, well I think let's throw the floor open. So does anyone have any questions, observations, comments that they want to make? Sorry, yeah.
Lots of comments actually. It's great food for thought.
Sorry, yes.